We are live.
Thank you. My name is Jose Gonzalez, Chair of the Finance Committee for the City of Salem. I welcome everybody to the January 19th, 2024 meeting. And I'm going to give the next, give their fellow councilors a chance to introduce themselves, and then followed by staff and any guests.
This is Councilor Nishioka, alternate, but maybe filling in as others join or not join.
Thank you.
This is Councilor Mickey Varney from Ward 8.
Thank you, Mickey. Josh, how about we start with you, Josh?
Great. Josh Eggleston, Chief Financial Officer for the city.
Jenny Matichek, Chief Accountant for the city.
Kelly Leinenbach, Budget Manager for the city.
Keith Staley, City Manager for the city.
Sorry, Jeremy Morgan's Accounting Supervisor with the Finance Department.
Thank you.
And I'm Shannon Thomas. I'm the Finance Admin Analyst.
And I guess I'm the one guest in the meeting today. So Ryan Pascarella, Independent Auditor for the city. I'm here to do a presentation about the financial statements. Formerly worked for Grove Mueller and Swank, a CPA firm of about 40 people in town here. We merged with another firm, and now we're about 350 strong around really the region here. So Oklahoma, Arizona, in that area. So that's why you see REDW behind me versus GMS. That's been there historically.
Ryan, thank you for attending and for that information. I didn't know that. Perfect. So I'll call the meeting to order, and I guess the next, I'll be looking for someone to approve the minutes. A motion. Anybody?
I move that we approve the minutes from the last meeting. I believe it was in November.
Yeah, November 20th. Correct. Thank you, Mickey.
And I'll second that. This is Councilor Nishioka seconding.
Sounds good. Moved by Varney, seconded by Nishioka. All those in favor say any discussion. There's none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Approval of the November 20 minutes. And anybody public comment? Josh, just want to triple check.
No, not today.
And I don't see any items under action items, right? So we're just going to move past 4, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so on number 5, management update information items.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll kick it off and then hand it over. But we have the annual comprehensive financial report completed and the third-party audit, and I'll turn it over to Jenny Matichek, our Chief Accountant. Just real quick, I'd like to thank Jenny and her team for getting everything completed. It's always a grueling task every year to get all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. So thank you very much, Jenny.
Thank you, Josh. Yes, so we're very excited to say that we've officially issued the city's ACFR, or the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, as well as the URA Annual Financial Report for fiscal year 2023. It was another challenging year with kind of some challenges we've seen before with new GASB accounting pronouncement statements that were required to be implemented, and some unique technology challenges this year. But I'm very thankful and proud of the work we've done and how hard the team was willing to work. You know, we put in some time over holidays and weekends, so I just really appreciate everyone getting us to this point. And this year we were able to get some support from the budget team, which was very helpful. They helped provide input for things like the management discussion and analysis, helped develop the transmittal letter, and then also helped with some of the analytical review requests that we get from the audit team. But I'll turn it over to Ryan now so that he can provide his overview of the reports.
Well, a couple of things you just said were on my list to talk about, Jenny. So good job with that one, right? My firm performed the audit for fiscal year 23, as was mentioned. The audit really begins probably in May is really when we get started with it. We start asking for preliminary information for the city for the year. We come out in, I think beginning of June is where we were. We came out, we were on site for 3, maybe 4 days, going to different departments, looking at the processes different departments have, whether if they're collecting money or something, how are they doing that? Making sure that we're comfortable with the internal controls, not only in the finance department, but really where the money is being collected quite a bit. So we spent quite a bit of time that first week doing that. We looked at one of the areas we did look at this year. Depending on what year it is, we cycle through once every 3 years, we'll look at some different areas, but there are some areas that are more critical in our minds that we look at. And one of those is journal entries and the ability for the city to just make manual adjustments to your accounting software. Normally not a good idea to have one person that can just do whatever they want to in there. That's how some of these Enrons and these frauds have happened. So as auditors, we are required to look at journal entries pretty much every year. So we go through a process, make sure there's multiple people involved in the process, that we can see clearly who recorded it, who approved it, all of that stuff. So that's really kind of what the first week is, just kind of going through all of that. And then we are patient for Jenny and her team to get ready for the year end. When you have your balances kind of done for the year, you have your audit reconciliations put together, showing why the numbers are what they are. And then we spend week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, really going through that. It is spread out a little bit more. Jenny mentioned there are some changes this year. Last year, there was a very significant change with how operating leases were recorded in your ACFR. This year, they decided that we need to look at your software subscriptions that you have. And if you have long-term, by that 2 years or more of some of these amounts, you aren't just going to expense them from a governmental reporting standpoint. They're going to end up on your balance sheet as well. So it was a lot of time and effort to figure out, first of all, what IT subscriptions arrangements that you have, put those together, looking at the agreements themselves to figure out, do they qualify for this new pronouncement? Do they not? And that's really kind of what took the longest, I think, this year, just, getting through it. I am hoping there's nothing next year that is going to be this involved in just getting it set up or anything. So it's really been the last 2 years. The GASB, the standards board setter, they've really done a number on governments, really just even getting ready for the audit. So your audit is required to be submitted to the audits division of the state of Oregon, the Secretary of State's office, within 6 months of the end of the fiscal year. So December 31 is really what the date is. That you have the same due date for submitting your ACFR to the GFOA, the Governmental Finance Officers Association. They're the ones that do an independent look at it, and you get your GFOA certificate if it meets the financial reporting standards. Both items were submitted. The ACFR was submitted to both places on January 15th. We asked for an extension and they granted it. So that gave us a little bit more time to work through the new IT arrangements and such. That was really the hang up, just trying to get all of that done. But everything was submitted timely. And now we just wait to hear back from GFOA about what comments they have related to it. So that will come out in probably 8 months or something like that. I mean, it takes them a while to get out there. So that's kind of what the audit process is. As long as I can share my screen, I will do that and that. Okay. 2 documents should have been provided to you as part of the package here. You might actually have the URA financial statements as well in there, but first item I want to talk about was the governance letter that is in here. This is just my conversation with you kind of about how the audit went, any significant issues that came up related to it. And really, it's anything we feel like as auditors, we need to communicate with the city, with finance committee at this particular point. So you're going to see in here, I always like to remind people what an audit is, but honestly, what an audit isn't. Because we are not going to look at every document that you have that was prepared during the year or anything. We give reasonable assurance that there are no material errors within that ACFR that we were talking about. So we do not give absolute assurance that every number in there is 100% correct. We work with a materiality. We do a lot of scoping and looking at larger transactions. We look at unusual transactions, but we are not going to look at everything that happens during the year. So our auditing standards say we give reasonable assurance there are no material errors in the financial statements. So, and there's many, many reasons for that in there. So when you get past that top of page 2 in here, as part of, well, we start in May, like I said, we look at what we get for preliminary information, and we decide kind of where we feel the risks are at a preliminary standpoint, where we need to kind of focus some of our time this year. So some of these were items that were in last year's governance letter, but there are changes to it, primarily the bottom 2. So anytime you have a complicated pronouncement coming out that's going to change what's in your financial statements, chances are we're going to say that is a high risk area. We are going to spend a lot of time on that, making sure that it is accurate. So lots of back and forth with questions, making sure we agree with how the IT arrangements are, I guess, looked at, what determinations were made out of them as far as discount rates, how long they're going to go. It's a very complicated process. So we looked at that. And then also with the bonds that were issued in 23, that isn't done every year for a government. So we make sure that it is being recorded correctly, make sure that, you know, you've got your premiums and discounts and everything. That gets complicated very quickly as well in there. So we added these 2 into there. The ones up here, self-insurance is always a difficult one. Not every government has that, but we're also looking for, you know, any manipulation that we can see within the city's finance or within the software, making sure that you're not, you know, hiding non-compliance by recording things in the incorrect places. So we spend quite a bit of time looking at where things are recorded, making sure that we're comfortable that there's nothing happening related to it. So with all of this stuff, there were no, you know, we didn't find anything that I say we need to talk about in this finance committee meeting. Things were recorded correctly. We didn't find anything that looked like it was, you know, manipulation or anything of the books in there. So that's kind of what you want to hear in there. It talks about estimates and such in here. Biggest estimates that every government has at this point is really the net pension liability. So the city's portion of the unfunded amount of PERS. And so that number fluctuates from year to year, depending on rate of return on investments that happen and such. But that is a complete estimate that is in your financial statements. And then also your other post-employment benefits that you have in there as well, as far as your health insurance and a few other things that are in there. So lots of estimates are in here. We always talk about adjustments that were made during the audit. So the finance department gives us, here's our final numbers, and then we audit them and see if we disagree with anything. So we did not recommend any journal entries. We didn't find anything we felt that needed to be changed. It was really just the city took a good amount of time to make sure that especially your budgetaries were, you know, where they needed to be. Things were recorded correctly. There was some adjustments that were made as certain areas were finished up. I'll just go right back to like the leases and the software agreements. We didn't know those numbers when we started doing our year-end work. And so there were adjustments that the city provided to us. We recorded in our system, and then we audited that area. That's as close to a journal entry as we had this year. So, and that's very common, especially when we get into new things that are happening within the organization. Other than that, it talks about, did we have any disagreements with management? No. management as always has been, very helpful with us, very responsive, getting us things as quickly as they can. Some things took a while to get, but we know that they were being worked on. So we didn't feel like we needed to keep bugging people. Hey, where is this? Where is this? When it was done, we got it. So I appreciated that one. And then attached to the governance letter, we put a copy of the letter of representation. It's an interesting read on everything that we need the city to tell us about if there is an issue with it. So in here, we talk about, have you told us about all the long-term debt that you have? Have you told us about, any, litigation that is happening here? All kinds of stuff, because we can't see everything. So it's really management representing to us. They've told us everything that we need to. That factors into why we give, reasonable assurance versus absolute assurance as well in there. But this is really just boilerplate information that is signed every year by management as part of issuing the financial statements themselves. Are there any questions about the governance letter as people read through it or anything?
Does the committee have any questions for Ryan? Sounds good, Ryan.
Okay, I'll keep on going. I'll just show you a couple things in the financial statements themselves here. This is a 248-page document, so it definitely takes a while for the city to put this document together. I think I have 5 pages in here that we created at my firm, and that's really just our independent auditors reports for the most part. Everything else the city has put together. So we just get a copy of this, and then we spend 2 weeks going through it, ticking and tying numbers, reading it, making sure it makes sense, all of that fun stuff. So in here, I'll go to page 13. We talked about submitting this to the GFOA. In the T letter that Jenny mentioned, right at the end of it, it talks about the fact that this is being submitted. It talks in here about what happened last year, because you did the same thing last year. You submitted it to GFOA and you received the certificate again for it. And in here it says that's 25 times. You've received this 25 times. So definitely, it's a lot of work to put this document together. It's more than just what an annual financial report is. Some of the stuff isn't required, but it's definitely a good idea for any government to do this version of it and add a lot of statistical and just information that is very helpful as you're going through this document in here. So excellent job by the city to receive this award this many times in here. Page 21. Here is our independent auditors report. And so you'll see in here, basically, it's going to go back through the responsibilities again. It's going to talk about reasonable assurance versus absolute assurance and everything. We put in here, talked about the IT agreements. That is definitely a significant change of what happened in here. But really what this is, most of this, yet again, is boilerplate. What you want is for me to tell you that the city received an unmodified opinion, which a clean opinion. We don't feel like there were any material errors. And that's what the city received again this year. We do not feel that there are any material errors within this document, as I kind of talked about from what we give an opinion for in here. So this is exactly what you would want. One change in here from the prior year to this year is we did not audit the Salem Housing Authority. That is shown as a component unit in this document. So if you were to compare this independent auditor's report to last year's, we didn't audit Salem Housing this year. So we had to put this extra paragraph in here that just kind of talks about that. Because when you get down into your financial statements, you'll see a separate column for the housing authority itself. I think I mentioned this last year, but I'm going to mention it again for sure. This down here scares people when they read this about the potential for the city having a going concern. Basically won't exist within a year or anything. This is completely boilerplate. This is something that auditors have looked at or evaluated every year. It's been in our standards for a long time. When this audit report changed a couple years ago, this was added in, just saying it's something that we're looking at. We didn't find that there were any issues with it or anything, but it is in there. And so I just like to point out that that doesn't mean there's an issue going on or anything. That is what our auditing standards tell us needs to be in there. It's a component of this. Do anybody have any questions on what this report is or anything in here? All right, then I'll just jump down. Okay, so we talked about the IT arrangements. Last fiscal year 22, this all pretty much would have been expensed. It just would have gone through your budgetary schedules as an expenditure and been done with it. So this year, from a budgetary standpoint, you're still expensing it. It's the exact same thing. You're paying the same amounts and everything. But when you get into this GAAP financial statement, all of a sudden, we've got amounts that you are locked in to pay related to these IT arrangements for the next 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever the agreement is. There's just a schedule that kind of adds up all of this stuff. And that's where we get to these numbers. It is a lot of work for the city to put this together, but this, yeah. So Jenny, sorry, yeah, all of the work that was done to put this together, here's your table, right? There it is, you know. But it was quite a few hours to do it. So this is something that is going to be in here going forward. Like I said, it doesn't change your budgetary schedules. You're still paying the same amount. It's just how it is shown in the financial statements changed here for you. 99 is, this page is your long-term debt schedule and just showing the bonds that were issued during the current year related to the community improvement projects that you have going on and everything. So that was one of the risks that we had identified to make sure that this was all being recorded correctly from a reporting standpoint, and we did not find any issues with that or anything. And then other than that, the one other component to the financial audit that we do right at the very end here, this is required by the state legislature, really. And so the Oregon revised statutes require that we do some work over compliance, just making sure you're following local budget law, making sure you've got a good procurement process. There's a whole kind of list here. When you get the gas tax money, are you using it correctly? Are you keeping it, separated out in your accounting software? So here's the money we got, and here are the allowable expenses related to it, because there really are some restrictions related to this. So we spend, a while looking at each one of these individual areas. We did not find really any non-compliance with any of this stuff in here. The only comment in here just relates to some deficit fund balances that are in a couple of the funds, and that actually I think was on there last year as well, from what I remember or something. There's just a few funds where that is happening, and there's a separate note related to it. But other than that, we did not have any findings related to Oregon minimum standards and the work that we are doing here. The one component of the audit that is not completed yet is separate from all of this, and it is the single audit. So for the federal money that the city receives, we select different funding streams that are coming either straight from the federal government or maybe through the state, and then it ends up, kind of in your hands. We end up looking at 3 or 4 different funding streams generally. Biggest ones recently have been like the coronavirus. Airport improvement funds can be a big one in there for sure. So we've started to work on that, but it is due by March 31st. We were focusing on getting the ACFR done by that January 15th date, and now we've switched over, and Jenny and some of the different program people are getting asked questions about the single audit, and just making sure that we're testing compliance to make sure they're following those grant guidelines that are in there for the most part. So we'll I'm assuming we'll have it done like within a month or so here. I don't want to be at that March 31st deadline. None of us want to be at that March 31st deadline. So a separate federal compliance report will come out once the single audit component of this is completed. But that's, yeah, down the road just a little bit there. So that's what I have for a presentation. I just don't know if there's any other questions or anything that I can answer.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions for Ryan and the audit report? Mickey, yes.
Thank you. I did have a quick question. And I wanted to say, Mr. Pasquarella, thank you so much for that overview, because those were some really key points in there. I kind of skimmed through all those pages, and it really helps to have some references. One of the things you mentioned earlier was that you looked at the bonds. And I was wondering, you said it's not done every year. So how often is it generally done?
Well, every government's kind of different. And what I'm saying is there aren't bonds that are issued every year. The city doesn't necessarily do that. We tend to see it maybe every 3 years, every 4 years for an individual government. But honestly, it depends. It really does. We've got some governments that it's, they're 6, 7 years in between issuings of bonds. And it is very easy to forget how to record these things correctly, because it's not easy when you don't do it for multiple years in there.
Counselor,
Okay,
if
go
I may,
ahead.
we're planning to issue another round of GEO bonds either in 2025 or 2026.
Okay. I think my question, I was also thinking about the page in the document that talks about the Moody's ratings, and on the utility bond, the last rating was what, March 2020? And so that's why I was asking about updates, if that part gets updated too. Anyway, just kind of general information.
Yeah, so the Moody's rating is something we get right before each issuance. So it's only going to happen if we're issuing bonds. Right now, we're not contemplating more revenue bonds for the utility. But if we were, we would get another credit rating. So that 2020 comment will remain in there for the utility until we issue bonds again. So it could be quite a while before that changes. The GEO bond one will be updated if and when we get another credit rating.
Okay, thank you. That helps explain it to me, because I didn't understand the process. Thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of like a credit score a little bit, but we only get it if we're issuing bonds. It's quite the process.
Okay, makes sense.
And I will say, I mean, one of the reasons to do the ACFR versus the shortened version of just an annual financial report is it does help with your rating and when you're going out and getting bonds, for sure.
Thank
Other
you,
questions?
Councilor Barney. Councilor Nishioka, you have a question?
I don't have any questions. Thank you further explaining that the ratings, the Moody ratings come in when you're issued bonds. That's helpful. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilor Nishioka. And Ryan, for myself, I think thank you for your time. I appreciate that, not only your words highlighting staff's efforts and work, their work ethic, and also that it's recognized in the report. That's great to see. So that was just thank you for that. All right. Well, Ryan, I think any other comments? Ryan, any other thoughts before we let you go enjoy your weekend?
Well, not quite, but it's almost the weekend here at this point. But no, I mean, it was already said. We really do, appreciate the work that the finance department and everybody does as we're doing the audit. It just makes the process a lot smoother. It's a good relationship. We appreciate that. We don't always get that. We're the evil people sometimes, but we definitely don't feel that way working with the staff. And they put up with our ridiculous questions. Oh my gosh, why is the auditor asking that question? But they give us the answers that we need so we can get the process done. So thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Josh, and everybody that helped us get through it this year.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. I think that happens at the council sometimes. So I think, yeah. Questions. But yeah, thanks again, Ryan. Thank you for your time, and yeah, appreciate it. Take care.
All right, thank you. Have a good weekend, everybody.
You too. Let's see, anything else on that item, Josh, or under continued business? Next one, it seems blank.
No.
Okay, number 7, new business, where we're gonna start talking about some of the meeting dates and times. Is that what you wanted to cover, Josh?
Yeah, just wanting to confirm that kind of that third Monday is still a good time, and just the format. We do have a few things coming up. We're going to be looking at a few different fund balance policies and some other things that'll be coming to the finance committee. So just wanting to coordinate with departments. We tentatively have February 20th as your next meeting, and just want to confirm that that timing still works for the body. We'll make sure we check with the 2 members that aren't present here also.
That's true, Josh. I have a comment before maybe the other councilors chime in. At the last council meeting, I think it was the last, but we got an update from the consultant on the revenue task force, and it was nice that they shared a timeline with regards to the budget committee's timeline, the revenue task force timeline, the city council's timeline. There was a lot of talk about how those are gonna work together. And it made me think about this one actually after I was chatting to Councilor Stapleton, as she was talking to me, I thought, that's true. Where does the work on this committee, where does that fit on the timeline? Where do we, what's sort of our role there, if there is one? Because I think when you say finance committee, it's sort of, it can mean different things to different people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly something that's been done in the past. We create kind of a annual work plan for the finance committee, so you can definitely kind of see what's coming and if there's things you want added. As far as your role with either the revenue task force and the budget committee, it really is what you make it. So you're advisory to the city council. You can look at things in more detail. So if there's certain aspects of that work that you, Mr. Chair, or the committee wants to review, certainly something that we can do. Just let us know and we can plug it in for your agenda.
Sounds good. That'll give us a little bit, they'll give us something to think about. And also, because I know the times, yeah, I think those are, at least for me, how they've worked out for the most part. But I think also I see it as a way to chance to support the staff, as if there's some information that we can get here, so that way, as we're at the council, it's always helpful to say, well, we've had a few councilors that at least hashed it out, talked about it, dug in a little deeper, and that usually gives the whole council a little bit more confidence, especially as we're going through the next 6 months, 8 months, that we have another set of eyes, or just, what I mean? So that's why I thought I'd ask.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any questions for Josh or feedback on the dates, Mickey, Councilor Varney?
No, I don't have any questions about that. I just have I guess an item that I'd like to look into in a little more detail, I guess, in the future.
Perfect.
One of the things, and this ties back to the ACFR a little bit, but also we're talking about budget stuff. The PERS liability. I know it's an economic challenge, because personnel costs take up so much of our general fund, and then of those personnel costs, I think the PERS is close to 20%. It's 19.3, I think. Anyway, in the discussion in the ACFR, it was talking about we continue to discuss methodologies to address the economic challenge of the PERS liability. And I'd like to know a little bit more about that at some point.
Certainly, that's something we can bring to you all. Kind of just how PERS work, how the unfunded liability functions, what the rate setting process and the rate collar the state has. And certainly there are some things that we can do to kind of control those costs going forward. But it does generally require some kind of investment, to offset the rates, but that's certainly something that we can bring forward. Yeah, it's been quite a few years, I think, since the finance committee saw kind of an update of what our unfunded liability is and kind of the rate setting cycle. And there have been a few updates that would be good. So we can certainly bring something back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Varney. That's been something on my mind, but I'm glad I hadn't even thought about it lately. So I'm glad that you brought that up because I know it's something we touch on as every time we talk about the budget, but we don't dig any deeper. So thank you for that. That'll helpful. Oh, we can see you now. Thanks. All right. Councilor Nishioka, any questions, any comments regarding the dates or the current date we have, if that's the plan to continue on your end?
So the only thing that I was wondering about is if we might be having an executive meeting on February 20th. And if so, it might run very close to a financial meeting. I don't see it on the calendar. So that would be the only concern I had for that February, the Tuesday, February, because the Monday's the holiday. But as you said, Josh, you'd be sending out a notice. And I think we just want to make sure that we don't have any executive meeting because it would be really hard to be online and then dash down here fast enough to get to executive meeting.
One option for those evenings when you do have a work session, just for travel time, is we could have a hybrid meeting. So those that want to join virtually can, but if you're in person, we could have it at Civic Center. You can join.
Okay.
Join in person, and then you'll be already there for the work session or anything else that might happen also, if that's something that the committee is interested in.
Well, that's the reason I'm here today, so that I can prove that that'll work. So yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. Councilor Nishioka, great comment. Yeah, you're talking about the reality of these meetings, so thank you. Josh, the only other thing I had is, as we talked about, the last time we went and issued that $100 million bond, we had a solid credit rating, and they've been, part of that was monitoring our action with regards to revenue, and they felt confident. We got good rating. Going forward, as you're talking about going back 25, 26, what are the things that are going to be, are they watching us today? I mean, where are the risks coming? And because I know that we've talked about these timelines with regards to our budget, but the reality is if these ratings go down, that money is going to get way more expensive in a couple of years. We're going to be fighting inflation, and we're going to be fighting a lot of things. The last thing we need is a higher cost, and which will mean less projects, which will mean less visibility. Like our citizens will see less action out there from their investment. So is there any way, I mean, maybe it's not a question you can answer today, but maybe there at some point, let us know where that becomes to play into where it really becomes a risk, because it's a risk today, but where does it really start to point, like the point of no return?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. I think it's something that we can kind of program for the finance committee and kind of walk through that credit rating, from the last bond and what the challenges were. So you guys can have a really clear picture of what those are going forward. Because you're exactly right. I don't think they're probably watching us right now. But what happens is when you go for that credit rating, they look at, your past, couple of years of history, your projections going forward. So certainly, if we were to issue bonds right now, there would probably be a lot of concern with that credit rating, and we might face a downgrade. So it's certainly something that the finance committee and the city council should be aware of.
And that'd be great. I think that's a great idea. Maybe we can look at that here and then report back to the council. I think that'd be valuable. That's something I think that'd be great to help with that part. So.
Absolutely.
Okay, so any other items for the good of the order? Any other questions or comments? Anything, Josh, from the staff, city manager Staley, anything else before we adjourn?
All good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everybody for your time. Be safe out there and have a great weekend. Thank you, Josh, and your team.
Thank you.
Thank you.